My name is Ann Johnson. I serve as the Director of Undergraduate Admissions here at NDSU. And I'll introduce my lovely friends that are very far away. And today we're going to talk about a student-centered approach to customer service. So we'll dive into that in a second. But I'll let you all introduce yourself first.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Carolina Pettis. I'm an assistant director in the Office of Admission, and I have been here for 6.5 years.
And tell us a little bit about Carolina, your thoughts or background or history with customer service.
Oh, great question. So I am from the Fargo-Moorhead area. So throughout high school and college, I worked at the original Moorhead Dairy Queen. So not any of these grill and chill businesses, the original one that created the Dilly Bar. So I worked there for 9 years. And one thing my boss there always taught me is that a customer is always a customer. And so that's something I always try and put in, like when I'm talking with students or parents, because they may not always be right, but I also don't want to lose them as a consumer or a customer.
I'm Kylie Davis. I have worked in the office for 3.5 years. Currently, I'm the recruitment manager for our Fargo-based admission counselor team and one in Bismarck. I have worked a lot of customer service jobs in my career, my short career. In college, I was a tour guide, which was really fun to be customer facing in that way. And then I served at Perkins during college. I worked at the Radisson downtown. I worked at a doggy daycare. I worked at Enterprise Rent-A-Car for some years after graduating, and they all had very different customer service philosophies and ways to handle different situations. And so I've been put in where like the customer is always right and you will bend over backwards to let them know that. And I've been in fields where like the customer's not always right. And that's okay, and how to fix that. But I think just being put in a lot of different customer service fields and experiences has taught me to be very adaptable and to be able to like think on my feet and problem solve for my own self without having to always escalate it to a manager, because when I was working all of those jobs, I was not the manager. But I was taught a lot of different techniques on how to like de-escalate situations. And sometimes when you're the front facing person, you just get a lot of the heat if you're not the one that created the problems or can help them solve them. So sometimes you just needed to let them vent to me and I would help them come up with solutions. So I have a lot of experience in very different backgrounds. It's really nice that at NDSU, the customers, the students and parents we interact with generally are happy to see us and excited to be here. When that was not always the case at like, say when you're renting a car because someone smashed into you and now you need a rental, not usually someone's favorite thing to do. So lots of different background in that.
Yes. I'm Adam Lundquist. I'm the Associate Director in our office, and I've been here for 13 years. A lot of the teams that I work with in our office are sort of more on the back end of things. They kind of do a lot of stuff behind the scenes. They work with data, they work with entry, they work with communications and those types of things. And they still end up having to employ a lot of things that we're about to talk about. They're still answering phones, they're still responding to emails. So even though a lot of their stuff kind of floats behind the scenes, a lot of the things that we'll cover are pertinent, I think, to almost any area when we're talking about customer service. I have worked in admission for almost 20 years. And so besides NDSU, I worked at another school that won't be named. But over the course of that time, I think my philosophy with customer service is as you go into the next year and the next year and you kind of start getting into that rhythm, I think it's really, really easy to approach customer service as I've done this before, right? So you pick up the phone, you answer the same question for the 400th time, right? And so I think any time that you have an opportunity to be able to kind of approach situations almost as if they're your first time, I think it really lends itself well to that situation, that conversation. And so in general, that's something I try to do, whether I'm responding to emails, face-to-face interactions, whatever it might be, is as much as possible trying to put yourself in that situation and approach it as if it's first time. Because I think that's where you're going to give the best opportunity to that person, even though, again, you're done that a million other times for all the other customers you've worked with. So
We're here today because typically at this conference, we will present on admission-y things and tell you all about our strategies and what we do. But we were asked to present on customer service, I think, because if you have met me, you know it's something I care deeply and passionately about, and I'm a little bit annoying about it. And I think it's an interesting thing to present on because some of it feels like, how do I make this not feel trivial or obvious. And so we try to include some really specific strategies. I've also worked in customer service really all my life. For my very first job at 14 as guest services at a baseball park. My favorite meme that's circulating right now is this is not offensive in any way, I hope, but it's the one about you haven't ever worked a job that made you mop and it shows. I really think you learn a lot by having to really do the dirty grunt work. And I started that really unglamorous work from a very young age. And it's just made me able to appreciate supporting students. I also know when we were working on the strategic enrollment management plan and we would talk about things like customer service, faculty didn't always like that phrase. And so I'm using that phrase as a default phrase. But I also know that sometimes people don't view students as necessarily customers and in no way want to diminish the excellence of academia or the rigor or the rules and policies that we have in place. That is never my goal, and I don't think we ever do that in our office. In fact, we say no a lot, but I think there's ways to do that to still help students feel empowered. And we'll give a little background on that too. Really glad that you're all here. We'll jump in a little bit. And my perspective when it comes to student facing, it's also based a lot on my own experience. I was a first generation college student. I worked full time in college. And I had a lot of instances at the institution that I went to, which I had a perfectly pleasant experience where I didn't respond to those emails or I didn't take action because I was too embarrassed to admit that I didn't know what they were talking about. I didn't understand the lingo. I didn't understand any of the things. And so I try to always keep that in mind, even though I've worked in college admission for almost 13 years now. And I say the same thing every day. It's the first time usually those students are hearing it. And I hear people on campus get really frustrated. Like, well, we emailed them 15 times. We sent them 17 texts. We emailed, we put up posters. Of course you did. Like, that's so great. But they maybe weren't in a place to receive it at that time. And so just remembering that our perspectives are different. So I'm going to shut up for a second and move on. So that's just the whole point is how we try to look at every situation of how can we make it better and how can we carry some of that load. And I think an example of this, I'm sure he's not on, but I went to grad school here at NDSU and got my master's of science in sociology. And in all of my classes, I had many wonderful professors, but I had one that I can recall who took the time to really get to know us and introduce himself and have us introduce ourselves to each other the first day of classes. And the dynamic that I had in his classes was completely unique and different from any of the other classes that I had because I immediately felt a level of trust with him that I didn't feel with everyone else because on day one, I knew his name, I knew his son's name, I knew something he was interested in. And I talked to him more than any other professor that I had because of that rapport that was established on day one. And to me, that's a huge part of customer service for my default word. I apologize if you hate it. Because I think trust is such a key part of that. And that was just a really key example in the classroom. We deal with a lot of happy people or like right before this, a mad one every once in a while. But I think service extends beyond just those transactional interactions and also in the classroom and in the presentations we give and the things that we do and the policies that we have. Are they really necessary? Are they prohibitive, etc.? So that's where I'm coming from with this framework. So who our customers are, I think are very multifaceted. Again, that default word. Of course, our students are a key constituent. I believe that it is our duty to be student-centered. That's part of our mission at NDSU. And so we try to honor that in the work that we do. That sometimes means, of course, telling them no because it's not in their best interest. But I still think that what is best for the students is at our center. We work a lot lot with parents and family members, more than we would like to sometimes, but we also appreciate them in the role that they play in the college search process. My hope is that y'all have a little bit less of that by the time they get to you. And then of course, in admission, we also are serving faculty and staff. We are the front door, and so you all are also our constituents to ensure we're representing you well and positively and in the best light and with the most accurate information. And then our alumni and community members and stakeholders. You know, it's been a while since I've had someone ask me, like, have you considered visiting students in the high schools, you know, because we're really trying to let people know that we do that. That's a great idea, and we do that and get that information out. But people care and they want to share their ideas, and so that's certainly part of our stakeholder and plays into some of our brand and reputation, which Adam will talk a little bit about too. So, lastly, my last point before I pass it on are just to get you thinking about the breadth of students that we have at NDSU. These are 4 minuscule data points. There are hundreds more I could have put on this slide, but of our almost 12,000 students, you know, we retain about 77% from fall to fall for first year new students. And that's great. That number's going up. We love to see it, but that means that many more are falling through the cracks. Could some of that be because they aren't experiencing the service they expected? Maybe. Could some of it be life circumstances? Of course. But I believe we all play a role in recruiting and retaining students. I do not believe that you can work at an institution and not play a role in it. So you are either helping it or hurting it. And my hope is that we were all helping it. 25% of our student body-ish are transfer students. Very different population from different walks of life. I was a transfer student. Carolina was a transfer student. And I think it's just important to keep in mind where those students are coming from. About 25% of our new students are Pell eligible. I actually don't know what that stat is for the total student body. That number has increased over the last several years. So Pell eligible, if you aren't familiar, is based on financial aid information that makes students eligible for some federal grants. So typically on the lower income side of the spectrum. So those students have different needs than someone who, you know, may be a full paying student with a very affluent family. And so we try to always consider what that student is bringing to the table. And typically when it's usually the parents who are really mad at us, the students don't get as mad at us sometimes, but it's usually never about the thing. It's about their loss of control. It's about their fear. It's about their inequity that they've experienced. And so trying to get to the bottom of what is that thing is easier if you keep these things in mind and ask questions to help you identify where they might be coming from in this situation. So again, these are just a very few small smattering of data points, but if you are new and you aren't familiar with our student body, there's a lovely OIRA dashboard on the website that breaks down many, many other data points that I think can help you get a sense of what might someone be bringing to the table. Are they new to this country, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, to help you begin to understand how you could put yourself in their shoes. Okay, I'll click for you, Adam.
So Ann already talked a lot about this, but so we'll talk more about this too as we go on, but why does any of this matter? And I think in any of these situations, I always think about like, put yourself as a customer in other situations, right? Like Ann talked about the students and the family members and all the people that we are working with on campus in our roles. But I also think often about, okay, how do I feel when I call Midco and get the first person that picks up or walk into the DMV? You know, all of those types of situations, I am in that case the customer, and how do I want to be treated? Those first impressions make a huge difference. They really set the stage and the tone for how everything else is going to happen from that point forward. So we do a lot, even the very basics of how do you answer the phone? How quickly do you respond to emails? All of that is what's establishing kind of the tone and setting the stage for those continual interactions you're going to have with the customers, whoever they may be. And talked again a lot about retention and how important that is of returning students from year to year, and how often the interaction that they have with us throughout the classroom, throughout different parts of campus and our offices, that too makes a really big difference. The interactions and the sense of belonging that they get when people take the time to get to know students, it really fosters that sense of belonging and beyond just, I'm a person here that you're trying to serve. And then brand and reputation, fortunately, we do get a lot of really good data points from things like our campus visit program. So we often hear from students and families the positive and sometimes the bad about interactions they have during campus visits. We don't get a lot of that from the positive interactions that we hear from phone calls and the millions of emails that we're responding to and the interactions that we have when we're with students out on the road. But better believe it, we often hear about the bad ones, right? And all of that, again, we are collectively NDSU. When we're talking with students, when we're talking family members, interacting with them, they likely don't always know you're this particular person in that department. You are, again, you may be the face of NDSU. And so all of that can either leave a very positive taste in their mouth or it can be a negative experience that they have. And that might mean they're not coming here in the fall. Or they may be leaving at the end of this semester. So every time we have these opportunities to be able to really build on the positive brand that NDSU is, student focused, the welcoming environment, sense of belonging, kind of all the things that we hang our hat on here as an institution. And then again, I go back to putting ourselves in other situations as we are addressing students in those situations that we're working with. And just some of the basics that I think, again, are really go without saying, but being empathetic, like understanding where are they coming from, trying to address the situation, understanding what the concerns might be. That's not always easy, especially when you have someone that's coming in, fire blazing and they want to complain about everything. But really taking that moment to try to understand and assess the situation. And that really gets into that second point about trying to listen and understand before immediately trying to offer that solution. I think that's tempting. I think that's if you're good at customer service, that's the immediate reaction is you really want to try to figure out where are we going to go? What is the solution? What do we try to, how do we fix it? But sometimes I think in doing that, I know I'm guilty of it. You don't take the time to really understand. Listening, understanding, comprehending, and then developing kind of a plan, I think is a more effective way to do that. And we talked again a little bit about fostering that sense of belonging. So all of this is again showing a sense of care, understanding, empathy, and really a genuine interest in trying to understand and solve the situation instead of again, just get them in, get them out, in, out, move on to the next thing. And that becomes harder to do the longer you're in a particular line of work, I think. But
Yeah, awesome. And I think one thing that I love that you said is you alluded to is owning the problem in a way. I think that's what happens a lot on college campuses because there are so many different facets and things that maybe go into a problem that a student is experiencing. I think oftentimes it's easy to not own that problem or to listen but be like, gosh, you should really talk to financial aid, or gosh, that registrar, you should really go talk to her. And yes, absolutely, that may be what the student needs to do, but I think we have an opportunity to lead them to water, so to speak, a little bit more and walk alongside them. And that takes time, right? Like it's an investment of time and energy. But sometimes it's as simple as, hey, I'm going to email them and copy you on and just help make that connection so you can solve this problem and then y'all can work it out together. For a student, that's huge and eliminates the intimidation factor, eliminates remembering who you said to talk to. And so I think there's little things that aren't as huge investments. Not that you need to make it your problem, but doing some of those warm handoffs, like when I have a very strict warm transfer rule in our office. If a student tells you their life story, do not make them tell it again. Like, you tell me their life story. And then when I take the call, I can be like, hi, Sarah, I hear you're having a really bad time. Let's talk about it. Instead of them having to regurgitate that information over and over and over again. I know you all don't even have phones, so that's maybe not applicable for some of you, but for those that do, I think that there's just like little small subtle things that get at doing these things that Adam talked about. I promise I won't talk on every slide.
Well, you can. So I was gonna come and do like an analogy with improv, but since we have a theater member of the theater department here, I mean, that's setting the bar really high. But in improv, it's always yes and. You never just shut it down with a no. And so this is sort of our customer service version of the yes and. It's the no but. So, like we said, taking ownership, how can we better do that handoff? So like Ann said, hey, I'm going to email them. So an admission, a lot of times is like, no, we don't have any scholarships left over for you because the deadline was 5 months ago. But let me have a one-on-one meeting with you. Let's go through your financial aid award so we can talk one-on-one. I can't probably find money just coming out of the air, but we have resources that we can help give you. In admission too, because we are one of the only offices with phones. A is for admission, right? And so since I have worked here, I have been asked, like, help me find the student org that came to collect canned goods at my house because they left gloves. Or how do you exhume a body? You know, not things I ever imagined talking or learning about working in admission. And I was like, well, obviously, no, I can't help get that body for you, but let me connect you to our police department or criminal justice department somewhere on this campus that can really help you. And I think that's important. If we personally can't help them, how can we help them in a different way? And for admission, and I'm going to say everyone, our students need a lot of handholding these days, no matter what student type they are. And so sometimes it may be like, oh, I'd rather just like pass someone along. But I guarantee you, once they get passed back and forth, that's not helping them feel comfortable or like they belong. And so the more we can do together to help get them where they need to go, even if we have to tell them no, is super beneficial for each of those students. Okay, and asking intentional questions. So one thing over the many years that Anne has taught me is probably one of my new favorite statements: peel the onion. So when we are talking to students, we're peeling that onion. We are trying to ask anything that we can to get us the information we need to help that student. And so it's more than not going to be a yes or no question. You know, maybe you're working with two students back to back, they have the same problem. Well, chances are they're two different students. So even though the problem's the same, how we get to resolve it may not be the same. So just knowing that students are all different and how we can sort of meet the needs for each of our different students, but really getting in and asking those questions. As Anne mentioned earlier, sometimes what they're mad about is not actually what they're mad about. And so really digging deep, diving in, seeing what we can do by getting them to answer some of those questions to help really build up our support for them.
I have a sticky note on my desk that says ask better questions, but I thought that sounded a little aggressive. And I didn't want it to sound aggressive for you all. So you all can ask intentional questions, but I will hopefully ask better questions.
And along with ask better questions, the question to not ask them is, do you have any questions? Because while it is very tempting, especially in presentation format, when you're working with students, or like ending your email with, do you have any other questions? They don't know what they don't know, and they probably do have questions. And they know
them.
and they know that they can come back to you if they have more questions, but it's kind of something that we just like say naturally. So we've been really trying to reframe and use different questions to end our emails or to ask them in different ways. Do you have any questions? Okay, so I get to brag on our office, I guess, a little bit because these are some of our best practices. Take them or leave them, I suppose. But one thing that we strive for is just clear communication, and that can mean a lot of different things. One, it can be like not using acronyms. Do you know how many acronyms there are in higher education? So many. We tried to actually, as one of my summer projects one time, my colleague and I were going to create like a dictionary of acronyms, and it got so long and outrageous that we gave up on the project. So not using acronyms because not everyone knows what the FAFSA is. Not everyone knows what
Syllabi is.
Yeah, so just trying to like reframe, especially in those first couple weeks of class when if you're interacting with some of the new students. NDSU itself has a lot of acronyms that are like unique to just our campus. And so even like what we call buildings, right? Some people will call the QBB the IAC if you've been here long enough to know that it was the IAC, or the STEM building versus Eglin Hill, or things like, so the little things matter, especially in the early stages of people coming to campus, and trying to be mindful of your audience, and of course adapting to your audience. How you address graduate students might be a little different than how you address freshmen on the first day of campus because they have different needs. Being proactive, we take a lot of phone calls, but trying to anticipate the needs of students, whether that be in event situations or on the first day of class or around midterms or finals, trying to anticipate what the students are going to need and being able to help them through that, because they don't know what they don't know, especially if this is their first time taking a college class or maybe their first time taking a really hard class. And they were used to a lot of hand holding in high school. And then COVID happened, and then they got like a whole nother level of hand holding being taught by mom and dad at home, or maybe helping with their siblings. So that's something we're trying to work through. And like we realize that yes, they are adults and yes, they are coming to college, but they are not the college students of 6 years ago. They're just not. And so at some point we have to help them along or we might lose them. Staying consistent. If you deal with students in a like variety of communication methods via email, Blackboard, Teams, phone calls, text messages, either like with your staff in your department or with students, trying to stay consistent. And I think on the next slide is also there's a bullet point about like documenting conversations, especially if you are going to pass them along to someone else, whether it's like CCing them on an email or writing a note, something to help you remember those conversations so that the student doesn't have to go through the whole situation again is really helpful. And those little things really matter and can make a huge difference. We have frontline staff. Not all of you, I recognize, have a department or like someone who sits out front outside of your office space. But if you have someone who, so to speak, works on the front lines, empowering them to make those decisions and help them have the tools to problem solve without having to escalate everything to a director or associate or something like that, just making sure that they have the training and the skills to be able to problem solve if it's something they can take on, and knowing kind of what the threshold would be to escalating situations.
One example I can think of a faculty side of this is, I took several online classes throughout both my undergrad and grad college experiences. And a lot of times my professors wouldn't include a greeting at the start of their email. They would just jump right in. And while we love that efficiency, it was terrifying to me because like, hi. And so just really subtle, simple things I think can go a long way to make students just feel more welcomed and comfortable by including a greeting in your email instead of just like class is canceled or your exam was poor, whatever you need to say.
Along with like the simple things, I think that really holds true. Like if I think back to, or if you think back to a time where you had a really good customer service experience, it probably wasn't something major that they did for you that made you feel like, oh gosh, I would love to come back here again. It was probably that they just did the small things. If you know their name, call them by their name, smile, be authentic and be like invested in what they're saying without being overly like fake nice. Because they can catch on to that really fast. But one of the parents that I met with not that long ago, he said he was on a college tour with his daughter and they literally had been to like over a dozen colleges. And he sat in my office and he listened to me talk for a while. And then he said, there's just something different about this campus. And I was like, uh-oh. And I said, what's that? He said, everyone just smiles here. And like we walked around campus and people were talking to each other and they looked like they'd like to be here. And I was like, wow, that's so nice. I feel that too, but I'm glad you picked up on that. And I share that example because you might not all interact with the students, when they're visiting on campus, or you might not be until they're in the classroom, but those little things when people are touring and they see you in the hallway and you're wearing your name tag, which I'm not today, so fail. And you're wearing your name tag and you look approachable and the first day of class you're like, you look lost. Can I help you? And maybe you're new and you're like, I'm also new and I don't know where I'm going, but here, let me help you. Or it's the little things. It's smiling, it's acknowledging them, it's waving, it's all the small things that really do matter. And people see that and it makes a difference. And that's like the campus culture. I think everyone who's worked here long enough will tell you, like, oh, the people are what keeps them here, but it's also what keeps the students here too. So just remember that even if you don't have interaction with students on a day-to-day basis, it could be your colleagues. Those things matter to them too. I already talked about documenting the conversation, but we've been trying really hard to do small things that will make the difference in the long run, because while they might need a lot of hand-holding up front, the more you can set them up for success, the less work it will be on the back side of things, which is really nice. And just in general, the interactions we have with students and parents right now take longer. And so being mindful of that and like blocking out time and scheduling to be able to actually answer emails or do XYZ that you have to do. Maybe it's grade or maybe it's host your office hours. I will tell you that my favorite professor in college was Dr. Boyer. And he taught a science class, and I waited until the last semester of college to take the only science credit that I needed to graduate because I hated science that much. And the thing that made me love his class is that he didn't make me like he leveled with us.
Yeah.
He was like, everyone in this class probably is taking this class because they don't like science.
Yeah.
And I was like, yep, that's me. And you're like, you don't like maybe you for whatever reason you ended up in this class, so let's make the best of it. And he would sit outside of the classroom every single day, 10 minutes prior to class, and he would just sit there and he would just talk to us and he would say, I'm here if you have questions. He also hosted office hours, but like I admittedly never went to a professor's office hours, but he was just there and he was like, hey, how's it going? And he remembered the little things like, hey, how was that trip you took last weekend? And then as we built rapport, I went to him and I was like, hey, I have no idea how to do chemistry, hence why I'm in this class that only has a 2-week chemistry session, but like I want to do well in this class, so can you help me? And then it led to like I actually did really good. I probably did the best in that class that I did in even some of the classes that I thought I was good at. And it's because he took that extra time and it was something so simple. He showed up 5 to 10 minutes early and he stood outside the door and he waited for us as the classroom was emptying. And by the end of the semester, he had like a whole posse of us that would talk to him before class. So just thinking about maybe you don't have the time to do that. Maybe you have back-to-back classes, but is there something you could do that will make a difference for students? And it doesn't have to be something very big. You don't have to, bring them pizza to class or whatever. Like if you want to do that, they would probably appreciate that too. But just going the extra mile when you can, and it doesn't have to be for every student all the time, because we understand like our job is very cyclical. Our busy times are probably not your busy times, but finding ways to make those small moments into big ones, into memorable ones, because they will remember that years and years later. And when I came back to work for NDSU, I told Dr. Boyer that and he was like, oh, that's the sweetest thing. And I was like, I genuinely mean that. And so like years and years later, like I was gotten emails from students who are like graduating and he helped them get admitted and they say thank you. And so just those small things really do and can come back to you years later. So go ahead. Oh, I was gonna say just ending the quote with like, we talked a lot about the questions you might get, especially if you teach the same class or if you teach an intro level class or you work, with new students, you're probably answering the same questions all the time. To us, someone referred to us as the Disneyland people the other day, and I thought that was really nice because at the end of the day, this is a really monumental time in a student's life. Like they're coming from high school, a lot of them are coming from high school to college. That transition in and of itself is crazy. And no matter what circumstance brought them to college, college is just a wild time in your life. Like there's a lot going on. It's a lot of independence. Maybe they're balancing working jobs, or maybe they have dependents, or maybe they're like life circumstances or their family circumstances are crazy. And so like we're all human, but this is like a really special time in their lives, and remembering that you play a small part in what builds the rest of their future. So remembering that, I think sometimes we have to bring ourselves back, because there are days in our office where we're like, oh, everything is changing. I can't help them. Like, what gives? And at the end of the day, we're like, we're just helping them make their dreams come true. And that's what we get to do. And that's really special. So every once in a while, we have to remind ourselves of that.
Yes, we do. That's the gist. We hope there were some key takeaways in there, but also hope maybe you're a little bit inspired because we're clearly passionate people who care deeply about the student experience, and every single one of us, I could probably name a time where we've all gotten it wrong. And so I think that there's also hopefully vulnerability. Maybe you have seen us get it wrong sometimes, but vulnerability and continuing to try to get it right, and try different things. And I think some of these little things really do make a difference. Like my professor having us all introduce ourselves and telling us about him is still impacting me years later. Like would feel comfortable talking to him in Target if we passed each other, and I definitely cannot say that about every professor that I had. And so hopefully some of those little things can help your experience better and make you enjoy it more. When we do these things and it feels good and positive, I love my job so much more, and it's so much more energizing and less life sucking, because sometimes we do some pretty life sucking things, processes that are like, oh, depressing, like I have to rescind your admission or whatever. So getting those nuggets of positive moments and feeling like I'm making their life better, I think will make us all happier. And well, it's mostly been Kylie. I've really passed the torch to her, but we present to all new staff at new staff orientation, and we don't always have the opportunity to get in front of faculty, but at new staff orientation, I say, congratulations, welcome to NDSU. You are now a recruiter of NDSU, whether you like it or not. And oftentimes the people in the room are facility staff, dining staff, people who are like, not me. I'm like, do you know how many surveys, comments we get about the flowers on campus? A lot. It all matters is the moral of the story. So thank you for listening. Welcome questions, comments, concerns, or some more like remarks.
There's a comment. Always brag on your office. You're crushing it.
Oh, thank you. We try. Okay, always happy to brainstorm ways we can be better.
Yeah.
We can better support you. We are the front door, so we do need to know a little bit about everything. So if you think we don't know something that we should, please tell us, so that we can relay it and represent you well. And hopefully together we can retain and recruit more students. Thank you all.
Thank you.